opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Some of us still carry the burden of battle. It threatens to drown us in our everyday lives. In battle, we had our weapons and combat gear to keep us safe, to keep us confident. But when we returned home, we were not armed with weapons and gear to cope with our own minds. I was lucky to find my combat gear, my mental weapon, and it's called Calmago. Calmago is a drug-free device that allows you to achieve calm in less than 3 minutes in moments of anxiety, stress, anger, panic, or insomnia, not with medication, but rather by activating the parasympathetic nervous system through breathing regulation and multisensory stimulation. A recent study has shown that Calmago decreases PTSD and anxiety levels in veterans, helping those who are suffering and having a long-lasting effect. Visit Calmago.com to learn how you can get Calmago through the VA or with a special veterans discount code.
Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm blessed, my brother. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Hey, did you see the game last night?
Oh, that was a good game.
But did you see the shot?
I lost money from that shot.
Oh, man, that shot was cold,
I
man.
hated it, but it was good. Damn. What's in those jeans?
You really want to know?
I do.
Exhaustion, muscle spasms, asthmatic issues, unexpected sickle cell trait crises.
Damn. Are you serious? When I was young, I found out I had sickle cell trait. My mom's told me, but I ain't have no knowledge of it. But when I got older, I had a child, and the doctor told me my daughter has sickle cell trait. You know the facts that both parents have sickle cell trait? There's a 50% chance the child may have the trait, and 25% chance the child may have the disease.
Hey, that's what's the count. Do you know that 2.5 million people in the United States have sickle cell trait, 300 million people globally? I didn't find out I had sickle cell trait until I was in the Army 10 years. Next thing you know, I had a sickle cell trait exertion site.
Sickle cell? I thought that was a black gene or something.
Nah, man, the Latin community is number 2. 1 out of 36,000 babies are being born with sickle cell disease. You could be Caucasian, Mediterranean, European. You gotta know your bloodline, man. There is an inherited gene in our community that has been forgotten. The name is sickle cell trait. WDCONSCT, also known as What's the Count, is out to bring awareness, education, and prevention to people all over the globe. Want more information? Call us now at 323-215-5384 or visit www.wdconsct.org. Do you remember studying sickle cell in biology class? What's the Count on sickle cell trait prevention is here to bring you awareness, education, and prevention conversations around the risk factors of this inherited gene. Visit wdconsct.org.
Muchos de nosotros nos vemos afectados por la enfermedad de células falciformes a diario y un número creciente simplemente no nos damos cuenta. Los impactos de esta enfermedad afectan a todas las personas y en especialmente a las personas de color y con antecedentes diversos. Estar en servicio conmigo y con los demás a medida que creamos una mayor conciencia sobre cómo identificar y dirigir el tratamiento de los rasgos de células falciformes y ayudar a las familias a saber cómo superar el trastorno de células falciformes. WDCONS
Zetovia salve, made from natural and organic ingredients, good for inflammation, poor circulation, hemorrhoids, yeast infection, lip sores, dry coughs, eye pain, minor cuts and bruises, and ready to purchase at botanicaherbalco.com. BOTANICAHERBALCO.com. HERBALCO.com. BotanicaHerbalCO.com. You're listening to The Farron Dozier Show on KCAA Radio, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM in the Inland Empire. Also streaming from the KCAARadar.com website, MBR Radio, TuneIn Radio, Pandora, Google Play, Blog Talk Radio, iHeartRadio, Podcast, Stitcher, Amazon Radio, just to list a few. Oh yeah, and the streaming videos are located at Tiki Live or Rumble under The Farron Dozier Show. Catch us live or catch us on the archives at The Farron Dozier Show. Shout us out, what's the count? Visit farrond.com for more information. Right. Good afternoon and welcome to a special edition of the Farron Dozier Show right here on MBR Radio. Make sure you go get the app MBR on all your streaming platforms, wherever you download your apps. Get the MBR app. You can follow us over there. You can catch me on Sunday nights at KCAA Radio and MBR for the Farron Dozier Show at 8 p.m. Pacific time. Where else? Lit Live on Sundays at 5 o'clock. Saturdays at 7 p.m. on the Revolution Radio Show on Lit Live. That's our Christian hip hop talk show. Beyond 2D is coming back in July, so we'll be in. Jessica will be doing the Beyond 2D topics back in July, the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month over there. And I believe that's it. I put the Blog Talk show on hold for now. I got enough talk shows right now. What else? It is World Sickle Cell Day. So we're going to be talking about Juneteenth, but it is World Sickle Cell Day as well, June 19th. So yes, if you look behind me over there, that is my cause. I advocate for sickle cell trait and sickle cell disease, mainly for myself, sickle cell trait, because I have the trait collapsed in the military from sickle cell trait exertion with rhabdomyolysis. If you've seen athletes, military personnel, people exercising, hanging out in Denver, Colorado, skiing, places where the oxygen is thin, people have had complications with sickle cell trait. Hasn't really been addressed over these years. The main conversation has been just make sure you don't mate with another person with sickle cell trait, because you can have a baby with sickle cell disease, and then that creates the sickle cell disease conversations. However, with sickle cell trait, there are risk factors, some known risk factors around sickle cell trait, and I experienced two of those. I've had pain in my left arm since I was 2 years old, and then also I collapsed in 2006, which ended my military career around sickle cell trait exertion. So that is very important. It is a global conversation. United States, about 3.5 to 4 million people have sickle cell trait, and millions still don't know in this country. But also globally, 300 million people plus have sickle cell trait, and those numbers are a million more still don't know that they're trait carriers. And again, they're not aware of the risk factors because of what we've been told by the medical community. So there are known symptoms and complications and things that can lead to sudden death, even the rare kidney cancer that's connected to sickle cell trait as well. So I didn't want to focus on all that today. I did some stuff on Saturday. Me and Jody went to an event. We did the Battle of the Gene song, shared our stories out in Pomona. Shouts out to Trudy for allowing us to be a part of that Saturday. But yes, today is the official day of World Sickle Cell Day, so I got to give shouts out for that. However, it is Juneteenth, and that's the title of this episode. I have my guy Caldwell Williams here. I met Caldwell in 2018, interviewing a World War II veteran. He's a Korean era veteran, and after I got done with the interview, we connected, and I've been working with him ever since with his curriculum around goaltenders, and just learning his conversation. Such a powerful dialogue, because most of the time we focus on, communication, talking to one another, but do you ever focus on the listening of one another? And how important is that? We think we are good listeners, but if you're listening to defend or you're speaking to offend, do you recognize that? And maybe you don't. As far as veterans, we deal with some type of identity crisis. But however, that is a human being flaw. We're all looking for our purpose, our passion, our gifts. What's next? Why am I here? Why am I born? Like, we're all looking for that. So in this particular conversation for Juneteenth, Caldwell's 90 years old, and he's going to tell you about his family coming from Texas. I believe this is a very fitting discussion for today, because there's celebrations all over the country today. But what's next? What's next in this Juneteenth conversation? You know, I think about when I looked at the Bible passages about Moses and the Israelites and how they walked that wilderness for 40 years. A 30-day walk took them 40 years because of what? Because they were enslaved for over 400 years, and then coming into the desert, the wilderness with Moses, attempting to show them that God was going to take care of them, miracles every day, but their mindsets were still in Egypt. They were complaining that they would rather be in Egypt. Why are we out here, Moses? So what happened? If you read that passage, that generation died off, right? God didn't just destroy them. He let that generation die off. And the next generation that was born, guess what? They weren't born in Egypt. They were born in the wilderness. So they had a different mindset than their ancestors who were born in Egypt that was enslaved. So that generation, 40 years later, was able to go into the promised land because of why? Because their mindset didn't have the emotional charges, the emotional wounds, as Caldwell says, the fractures of our integrity. They didn't have that. They acknowledged their ancestors that died in those 40 years, but they were able to listen, have the confidence and courage to move on into the wilderness. I mean, out of the wilderness to the promised land. But why though? Because even when they got to the promised land, to Canaan, they still had things that they had to come up against. Now, can you imagine that first generation of 40 years going into the promised land with the upset and the frustrations of why are they out in the wilderness? Why are we doing this? Why we this, Moses? Why are we doing this? And then had to then take on all the other stuff that they had to create, they had to go through. They had to be able to have a new mindset because they had to create their own way when they got to that land. And I relate that to our community as Blacks because I believe that sometimes there's some of us, not right or wrong, but we still have this mentality that we're upset about what happened to our ancestors. And it's not wrong that you can be upset, but then what's next? It's our turn. I don't have that mindset. Caldwell right now is the closest that I could get to someone who had their parents who was first generation free of slaves. So he has some direct connection to slavery from his parents. And you're going to hear that from him today. But also you're going to hear about how can we move this conversation forward. There's nothing wrong with being upset and frustrated and whatever that is, but then it's our turn. And he's going to share with you what it looks like for us to take that next step, right? To move that conversation forward so that my grandson and my granddaughter is not going to have to deal with this when they get my age at 50. They'll have their own things to deal with for their generation, but I don't want them to have to deal with the stuff that we're dealing with today. I can tell you that my grandfather on my dad's side and my grandfather on my mom's side, two different conversations. My grandfather on my dad's side was a child post-slavery, and he taught his children, I'm going to teach you how to be independent so you don't depend on the white man. My mom's dad, my grandfather, he put that stuff behind him and he created his own way for his family, got into the church and taught us, hey, you make your own way. Don't worry about what happened about that. Create your own path. What that did for my dad thought that he was racist. For 60 plus years, my dad thought he was racist. Why? Because what we don't realize as parents, that sometimes when we talk to our children about these things in the world, we're also planting that seed in their subconscious mind to look out for those things. So can you imagine my dad's 8 years old going through life, being independent? Yeah, he was independent, but also in the background listening and looking for not to depend on the white man. And that 60-year span had my dad thinking he was racist. until he and I had a conversation. I'm like, man, you are not racist. You might be prejudiced, but you're not racist. And he and I had a heart-to-heart talk before he passed. And I asked him, why are you racist? And he gave me this whole story, a bunch of reasons. And I can tell you that how I learned about if you're racist or not. If you ask a person if they're racist and they give you a reason, I'm willing to bet that we can have a conversation long enough that that reason will disappear because that reason is not their own influence. Sometimes these conversations are influenced by our bloodline, by our families, by conversations, wanting to belong, being connected to people, like whatever that is. And so my dad wasn't racist because he gave me a reason. And when I heard his reason, where it came from, it was like no wonder. But my grandfather influenced that, not purposely. I mean, that was a talk that he had with his children. But sometimes as parents, we put things into our children's lives to protect them from what we went through, and that's not even their worry or their concern. And then they grow up with that in the background of their mind, trying to figure out and pay attention to that survival thing so it doesn't happen to them. And it's not right or wrong. We need those skills to survive. But what skills do we need to live life? And it's different. So I appreciate you for listening and tuning in. I'm going to get right into it because my guy right here, man, he is no joke. He has a curriculum that he's been using for 60 plus years. I'm going to let him talk for a little bit. Actually, we have his trailer for his documentary that's going to be coming out shortly. So let me introduce him, and then we're going to play the trailer, and then we're going to go from there. What's happening, Caldwell?
I like what you had to say. Thanks.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you for taking time out this afternoon to have this conversation about Juneteenth and what's next. I like to talk about what's next. So introduce yourself. Give him a little bit. I'm gonna play the trailer, and then we're gonna just dive right into Juneteenth and how this conversation relates to you, and then we'll get into what's next, the second part of the show.
Let's do it.
All right. So do you want to say who you are? You want to introduce? You want to say something about the trailer? What do you want to say?
I'm number 10 of 11 children born to a first-generation free couple in East Texas, a county called Cass County, Cass. I think it's one of the largest counties in Texas. It abuts the Louisiana border. Our farm, which my parents were buying, was 25 miles from Shreveport, Louisiana, and an equilateral triangle. We were also 25 miles from Texarkana. And now our farm is the other point of that triangle. And Juneteenth was in the whole county, every Black in the county, and we were all farmers. There were no cities in that part of Texas. Juneteenth was the big event of the year. In a gigantic open pasture, people would congregate more than 1,000 to celebrate, and all the stuff that goes on during celebration. And I remember we left Texas when I was 10 years old, so this was my first 10 years was a part of that environment. And I remember they would a truck would come with gigantic blocks of ice because there was no refrigerator or phones or anything of that in the 30s. Gigantic blocks of ice. And at age approaching 60, I'm now 90, I found myself dealing with a trauma that I experienced at the Juneteenth celebration.
Oh no.
Apparently I had enough personality or intelligence or something attractive that the teenager who was charged with taking an ice pick and breaking the ice down chose me to help him. Al, my brother 2 years older than me, felt he should have been chosen. And so we struggled over the ice pick. And I couldn't understand, and I often had that kind of conflict with that brother. Why are you so mean to me? I haven't done anything. So we're struggling over the ice pick. My brother yanked it from me, and the wooden handle hit him in his mouth and broke off his 2 front teeth. We had no money for a dentist, so he went without dental care to those broken front teeth until he joined the Air Force in 1950, I think it was.
Wow.
And I suffered the guilt of that it was so painful, I suppressed it and forgot about it and thought I was rid of it. And when I finally got in touch with it, I realized it was a source of a whole series of pathological struggles in my life because I was suppressing the guilt. And what I did in suppressing the guilt was I projected it on him because I didn't want to feel the guilt. So what I created in my head was, he was mean. He was mean to me, and so he deserved what he got. So that's how I survived for 50 years.
Wow.
Until I got confronted by one of my students who said, Caldwell, apply your own data to yourself. And when he said that, I immediately recalled the incident. Like,
That's
oh
how
my
powerful.
goodness.
That's how powerful the brain is.
First step I had to do was, and what I did was, forgave that young Caldwell who did that. And the pain was lifted.
Wow.
And the nightmares ceased. I had been having nightmares all of my life about my brother being mean to me to justify what I did to him. And there's more.
There's more. So we're gonna play the trailer. It's a few minutes long, ladies and gentlemen, and then we're gonna come right back and get into some of this Juneteenth. And again, we're gonna talk about what's next. If you heard that story of what he shared about him and his sibling, imagine that we all have some version of that in our life that we haven't dealt with.
Absolutely.
And that some of our behaviors are coming from some of those guilts and shames and embarrassments and disappointments in ourselves first, not just in the people, but in ourselves. And self-forgiveness is so important. All right, so let's get right into the trailer. This is going to be Caldwell's trailer of his documentary. And the documentary is almost finished too. But this is the trailer that we have. Check this out.
The most compelling social need of humans is to belong. All 4 of my grandparents were born slaves. My father's father, he was 7 years old and sold away from everything and everybody he knew. He never again saw any member of his family. My father, he was born in 1884. His mother had died in childbirth, and he raised himself from age 8. The sheriff came with his posse, took my father and my oldest brother and beat them. My father died with scars on his back from that beating. If the sheriff puts you in jail in a Jim Crow South, where do you turn to seek justice? I love school. It became a source of me finding myself. When I had graduated from UCLA in 1957 and was never even able to get an interview, no Jews, no Negroes, no Hispanics, no Orientals need apply. Now what do I do? Boy, you add color to our faculty. That's all we're interested in. All the other counselors were instructed to give me their failing seniors, dopers, rebels, suicidals. Listening to 12th graders who were not going to graduate, they told me what was going on in their lives. I discovered that I had something to offer people that I thought had everything. Word was already out on the campus that the skinny black dude was cool. I got all these kids who want to talk to me, and I don't have enough time to see them. I think I might be able to see everybody if I saw them in groups. Individual psychotherapy on a couch was the only method. Skinny black dude wanted to do groups? You can't do that, because it doesn't exist. To hell with them, let's do it anyway. Parents want to know, what are you doing to bring about this reaction in my kid? I've been sending my kids to the best psychiatrist in Southern California, and this hasn't happened. This shit works. Developing adolescence without narcotics is a radical new national idea. Oh, you can't do that. Alternative school that includes sensitivity to the mental health needs of our students. This is too big for you. Would you be willing to train my managers? Yeah. Who's Caldwell Williams? He hasn't published anything. 22 Iraq-Afghan veterans committing suicide every day. I think I know who these young people are. Mr. Williams, you don't want to touch this. You don't know who we are, Mr. Williams. And I said, yes, I know who you are. Maybe you don't know who you are. Did your parents encounter racism? Oh my gosh, yes. How about your grandparents? Oh my, even worse. Then how did we get here? Someone persisted and prevailed in spite of. I would assert that no less is required of us.
I don't know, Caldwell, man. Every time we watch that, man, it's just more and more emotional just to get to understand where our country has come from, right? So what do you want to say about Juneteenth before we get into some of these deeper levels of this topic?
First thought is that after 300 years or so of enslavement, we who are descendants of those people, like I am, were re-enslaved for another 100 years. They call it Jim Crow, but it was another form of slavery. Mm-hmm. And today, in 2024, people who look like you and me, who immigrated after being freed of slavery in the Caribbean and Central and South America and Africa, are way ahead of us in healing and being liberated and assimilating into the American economic machine. Mm-hmm. And I came out of retirement to deal with kids who were committing suicide from Afghanistan and Iraq, and thought that my process of healing, which we can talk about a little bit later on, was related to me mastering standard English. Mm-hmm. Only recently, since I've been working with you, did I realize, oh, heck no, I mastered standard English a long time ago. When I left elementary school, they programmed me for journalism as I went to junior high school. I didn't even know what journalism was. But that was a statement of the system. Oh, this boy's got the English thing down. He should write. Mm. They didn't say that to me. It might have affected my career if I had known that, but that's some trial and error. What I discovered was that it took me 2 years at UCLA, 2 years of college, before I had enough confidence to participate. I felt so inferior to the kids who surrounded me in the UCLA classrooms whose father was teaching the class. My dad didn't look like that. My dad, born in 1884, whose mother died in childbirth when he was 3. First generation free. And I was healing from the genes that were passed on to me, injured by the enslavement. And so on this journey, in the latter part of this journey, have I realized and identified the mindful injuries that exclusion inflicts on all of us, and it's generational. It goes on. That's enough for me to say. So Juneteenth, that large pasture that the whole county would gather in celebration, and all kinds of things went on. Looking back, I could see teenagers and young people were looking for corners to pursue romance. Preachers were preaching, baseball players were playing baseball. All this was going on simultaneously. And I remember there was a value placed on the farmer whose watermelons were ripe in time for Juneteenth.
Oh my gosh.
and so there's a planting season usually around Good Friday in April. And then the anxiety was, grow, get ripe, so they'll be ready for Juneteenth. So that's my memory of Juneteenth was a celebration.
Now, in the process of your 90 years, and you developing your own curriculum and principles, your first statement about the sense of belonging for human beings. Let's touch on that, because that really is the core of your conversation. So touch on how important the sense of belonging is for us as human beings.
No matter what part of the planet our tribe comes from, exclusion is the basis for all punishment. Our fear of exclusion is greater than our fear of death itself. As a matter of fact, our fear of death itself, when investigated, is related to us. Am I going to be in the right place? Or am I going to be in that group that, that's not treated so well?
Right.
Fear of eternal exclusion from the good stuff. And we evolved cultures. The early form of the culture was the tribe, to which we could earn membership either by the way we look or by our participation in the work. When I was in my 30s, we bought a house just west of the UCLA campus in Westwood, and we could walk to the campus for free lectures and the like. And one evening at a lecture, an anthropological lecture, the lecturer said, when I was a young man, I apprenticed under an anthropologist who was doing research in Peru, high in the Andes Mountains. And I got to travel to Peru with this anthropologist. And he said he was dealing with a village on a plateau high in the Andes Mountains. There's a plateau at the end of which was a large building and then little huts along the way where people lived. And the guides answered when asked, "What's that bigger building? What is it? That's our sacred space, like a church, apparently." And he said, on the facing, on each side of the opening to the sacred space, was a large piece of wood with some carvings on it that was clearly some statement. Well, what's the statement? Oh, those are our rules. What are the rules? Translated, tell the truth on one side, and the other side, don't be lazy. And I was about 30 something years old at the time, but that impacted me, both my head and my heart. I said, that's our 10 commandments. Stated in 2 sentences, because it covers it all. It is the lazy man who covets somebody else's stuff instead of being on his own. And it is to our detriment a tendency to not tell the truth to protect our behinds, which ultimately brings us down.
So let's get into, because I want to touch on the Jim Crow era, because that is so significant before we get to how we move on from that. But let's talk about that fracture of integrity that you saw your family and even you had to heal with. We did an interview together, and the lady asked you, how come you're not mad at the white people? Like, she asked you, like, why you're not mad? But talk about that, like, coming from that part.
We're told we're supposed to be mad, and predators who want to recruit us to their game or their gang encourage that. I was working with a group of Black 70-year-old Vietnam veterans, all of whom were seeking to rehabilitate their time in California prisons. Summary of their story: we were workers on plantation, Jim Crow plantations, cane fields in Louisiana, cotton fields in Mississippi, when we were drafted into the military service and sent to Vietnam. At first, we celebrated our upgrade in the standard of living. One man said, lunch in the cane fields was a tin bucket with syrup at the bottom and a biscuit. 3 meals a day in the military, clean underwear, showers. Boy, this is better life. Until realizing that because we had no education, we were thrown in the front lines in the killing fields of the jungle. No, this is not a better life. Popcorn was heroin was as accessible as popcorn. They all became addicted to heroin because it emboldened them to do the killing of gooks. The leadership looked the other way. The leadership was predominantly white. Young white men who had gotten their commissions in Southern colleges and were supporting and defending Jim Crow by carrying their stars and bars flag with them, even in the jungle. So beside their sleeping quarters, they would post their flag. And these 70-year-old Black men said, we came to, as addicted, emboldened persons, when we were offended by one of those crackers, which they call these guys, just lob a grenade. And the word fragging was invented. And Washington Defense Department didn't want the public to know, but they experienced these activities as losing control of their military. Went to Congress and said, we need to regain control of our troops, because in the streets, parents are marching against the war, screaming against our participation. And in the jungle, our kids are killing one another. And Congress passed a law in 1973 converting to an all-volunteer service.
Yeah.
And since then, a very thin sliver of the population among the non-commissioned troops are kids from uneducated families, no matter the race. And Department of Defense can do anything they want with them because their parents don't complain.
In your documentary, you know, you mentioned about all the things that our ancestors went through, and now, you know, it's our turn.
Yeah.
Leading up to what it being our turn, what are some of the healing pieces of that past history do you think that we need to start?
Well, thank you. We've identified 3 skill sets crucial to one being able to navigate their own inclusion, their own assimilation into the culture. And those skill sets include, I call it an organized, systematic approach to thinking, planning, and executing. The broad term that I got exposed to growing up and in college was critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But the definition of critical thinking was so amorphous that every person I talked to had a different definition. I need something clearer. And that's how we came up with, I call it a roadmap, an organized, systematic thinking and planning approach that applies universally, starting with turn. That gives you a chance to look inside and see what path you're on and whether you want to do something about it. In the scriptures, John the Baptist said, repent. Synonym for turn. Okay. And I intentionally use turn because of the experience that many Americans have of being forced to participate and to testify to get adults off their back to stuff that they didn't really experience. So there's a resistance to the presentation of religion to a lot of our people.
Sure, yeah, for sure.
And so when you turn, nobody externally is telling you which way to turn. And when you turn, you see something. You see something. What do you want to do about it? And you get to make choices. Whether or not you do it and what it is you do. Because when you take that step, trust yourself enough to take that step, another door opens up for you. You see options there. Pick one. Now we're talking about goal setting. Because you pick one and you pursue that, you'll get a result. You get the next picture. And you're able to tell whether you're making progress toward that direction which you turn.
Right.
I'm moving. This is happening. And so the roadmap to achievement is a kind of a template. No matter what you're working on, you can go back to. The second skill set is empowering dialogue, which I think is most important of all, because it is language that identifies the tribe and that creates the culture.
The language.
Yes, language. And I say empowering dialogue because dialogue that empowers is dialogue that includes both. The very word dialogue, di means two, speaking and listening. And we are deficient in our training, in our listening skills training. Nobody listening to this voice in private or public schools from kindergarten on through graduate degree had a course in listening. That is a new phenomenon that's now emerging at the same level that mindfulness is finally emerging a century later. I don't want to diminish the importance of speaking because the way we speak creates a condition for the other person to feel safe enough to listen to you.
Yeah.
If you offend me, you just shut me off because I'm going to retreat, forming my rebuttal so I can come back at you.
Yeah.
And in our excluded culture as slaves and then Jim Crow victims, we developed a culture that young people embrace. Trash talking. Talk so fast and so well, you shut the other guy up. And the only value that is acceptable there is winning.
Yeah.
And so the guy who never loses is the top of the pyramid in that culture.
Yeah.
And we are at the present time in touch with young people who essentially had good backgrounds from middle-class families, but they chose a path to be a part of the trash-talking thug culture.
Yeah.
You wonder why? Well, without investigating what the pain or injury was to that person who caused him to make that choice, this is the community in which he feels most comfortable, no matter his background.
No matter the background.
And that suggests that there's something going on, unidentified, undiagnosed in that child's background that you're missing when you're saying, why is this boy acting so crazy?
Yeah.
And the third skill set is, I call it assertive management of change and transition. Change threatens us if it's change on which we feel no control. We seek change. We would take, and we have the ability to go out and look for it for ourselves. As a matter of fact, it's how we grow.
Yeah.
Learning to be the one taking the initiative, learning to be assertive so you are pursuing the change rather than change pursuing you, makes all the difference. And when we feel no control, we are threatened and we resist change, or we get drugged, drunk, stolen, anything that suppresses so we don't have to feel it.
I want to touch on this part of the conversation as us as Blacks and the other cultures who ancestors came to this country, right? As second-class citizens, when we were all hyphenated.
Yes.
Right? Let's talk about that so that we can address what it's going to take for us as a Black culture to move forward beyond just the celebrations.
When we think and are caught up in feeling sorry for ourselves and giving a broad brush to those white folk, is just that's one monolithic group. We block off our ability to recognize opportunity when it emerges. So we got a mindset, and we know we know it's the man, the predator who had impact on our culture, on our community, including those boys in Vietnam, was Elijah Muhammad, who said, "Don't you see the enemy is? It's a white man." He objectified the white man the way the white man had objectified the Vietnamese. Those are gooks. You're not killing people, you're killing gooks. And in today's culture, you're not killing people, you're killing terrorists. Well, Elijah picked up on that and said, by any means necessary, to do whatever you need to do to the white man. He's the devil. And a whole bunch of our boys, absent any other guidance, bought in and joined his gang, only to find that he was not as he represented himself to be. And many of them still pursued that religion, but not Elijah's version of it. But there's still a considerable group that is still caught up in Elijah's gang.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about because sometimes in our enslaved conversation of our healing process, we say that our culture was treated the worst, you know.
Yes.
Because once you compare to someone else's, you're always going to find someone who was worse off than you are, right? But go ahead.
Let me recall some terms, and you and your own experience, whoever is listening, will recognize. WAPs, SPICs, crackers, niggers, Hoosiers,
Orientals,
wetbacks.
I remember Orientals,
ragheads. I'm not thinking of the terms that was used for the Chinese, but yeah. But Orientals, yes, and Orientals prefer apparently Asian, but they were Orientals. All tribes coming to the United States were balkanized and shuttled off to ghettos. I said to a person who's a friend of mine whose ancestors arrived in 1629, and he was 12 generations Yale, Wall Street. And he mentioned that in their Connecticut community, John Turney's son was his neighbor and friend. And Turney was an Irishman who was a world boxing champion. And I said, "Oh, was he able to move into your English elite community because he was rich?" And Peter said, "No, he moved into our community because he got an English girl in our community pregnant." And that got him in.
Yeah.
And so therein is an explanation for what also evolved in our culture.
Yeah.
Boys improving their social circumstances, the opportunity for their family by impregnating.
Let me take a break real quick, Caldwell.
All right.
Real quick. All right. You're tuned in to the Farron Dozier Show right here on MBR Radio. As you can see, this is live. You got people doing the lawn over there. It's the holiday, so people do cut their grass, whatever they're doing over there. But this is real life right here. This is what happens when you go live. You have no idea what's possible, what can happen. You just, you deal with it, right? So again, we're listening and sharing from Caldwell's perspective on Juneteenth, but more so, what is it going to take? What's next for us to heal, right? And that's what we're going to dive into next and start some of this healing process. Shouts out for those that are listening and watching. So we got some comments. Dexter said, yes, Land Eyes. That was definitely one of them that they used back in the day. Caldwell likes that. Mr. Turner, good afternoon. He calls me AA Ron. Shouts out. That's my buddy out there. What else? Let's go. Dexter said, let's go. Let's get it. Matthew has the fire emojis. That means the conversation was hot. And so we appreciate you all for listening. Again, we're going to come right back and get more in depth of what this healing conversation is. And then we'll let you go. All right. Won't be too much longer. But I really want to focus on the process of what it's going to take. It's not right or wrong or good or bad to celebrate. We want to acknowledge our ancestors. We want to acknowledge, our past. You don't want to dwell in it, but you want to reference it, because when you reference, you can learn from things. Some people only focus on the negative of slavery, but we're talking about the strength and what they went through in your culture. This is not just African Americans. We're talking about all of those who came to this country as second-class citizens, and we're going to talk about this after the break, that were hyphenated, all deal with some type of emotional fracture of their bloodline. A lot of families came here fleeing other countries, their own home countries, to come here for a better opportunity. But then they get here and they're still dealing with inclusion as an emotional portion of it. See, the society talks about inclusion and exclusion from what you can. While I did this for you, I opened up these doors for you. You should be fine. You should be happy. You're included. Yeah, but you can open up all the doors that you want. But if I don't experience myself being included to walk through that door with confidence and courage, then I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to go through that door. It sounds good, but it sounds good for him, not for me, because of what my culture, what my ancestors have talked about, what it is to be in the United States as a person, or even maybe as an object, because we label one another so much, from our skin color to wearing glasses to a beard or whatever. However you identify and label people, it disconnects you from that human connection. So some of these labels on how we even talk, that's why he said the communication dialogue is so important, because how we talk to one another and listen to one another from the labels is enough to keep us from being connected. So we're going to play just a couple of PSAs here, and then just come right back to the conversation. I appreciate y'all. Do you remember studying sickle cell in biology class? What's the Count on Sickle Cell Trait Prevention is here to bring you awareness, education, and prevention conversations around the risk factors of this inherited gene. Visit wdconsct.org. Tune in to the Farron Dozier Show on KCA Radio 106.5 FM, 1050 AM, also streaming from the KCARadio.com website on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. Pacific Time. Brought to you by Sports Collective TV, Sports Collective Radio, and Sports Collective Media. We got the Heme Factor, we got In the Zone, and we got Fourth Down in the 20-second timeout sports segment. All for you right here on the Farron Dozier Show on KCA Radio 106.5 FM, 1050 AM, also streaming from the KCARadio.com website with my guest hosts Robert Lamar and Coach Will. Catch us on Sports Collective Media on Instagram and Facebook, and make sure you watch us Sunday nights at 8 p.m. on KCA Radio 106.5 FM, 1050 AM, also streaming from the KCARadio.com website. Music, talk, sports, and so much more on the Farron Dozier Show.
I just wanna breathe this name, my God. Lift this name up high, dedicate this life, give 'em all we got. We will testify with our hands out, keep 'em up in the sky.
I just wanna praise. I just wanna praise. I just wanna praise. I just wanna praise. I made it up out of the city, avoided the hate and the gritty. Me and my little brother, my lovely mother tried to make it easy, but we was some knuckles though. We used to let them knuckles throw. We used to let them chuckles go when we thought about the places we would go. Yeah, lights off. Yeah, no really. Lights off. Yeah, no money. Lights off. Under the candlelight.
All right, welcome back to the Farron Dozier Show. Right here, a special edition Juneteenth episode with my guy Caldwell Williams. They're still doing that. They're still cutting grass over there. That's real life over there, huh? All right. So
may I say something about? I want to introduce the word Lee Atwater.
Yeah, please. Yeah, touch that, please, because that's key.
In pursuit of making his Republican Party the majority party, which Nixon wanted to do, Lee Atwater, who was a political strategist for Reagan, came up with the idea. He didn't use the same language as we, but my translation of what he tuned in on was Southerners who've been Democrats since the Civil War belong over here with us. And he approached Southerners using the N-word. You're in the party with them. Get your butt over here where you belong. So he introduced inclusion by race. And they flooded to him like flies to syrup. In less than a generation, during Reagan's first term, by the end of his first term, the slaveholding segregationist South was virtually 100% Republican. And because they provided the foot soldiers, they took over the Republican Party. The Republican Party of Trump is identical to the slaveholding Jim Crow South. And they have expanded that group to include the Midwest bigots who were never outed in the first place. During Jim Crow, every Midwestern state, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, had sunset laws. If you were black, you had to be out of town by sunset. And so their sympathy was with the slaveholding, the Jim Crow South. And their sympathies were with Hitler, because on our farm in 1939, my older brothers and my dad had this long poles that they carried from our land and stretched the wires for an antenna. And my dad had a radio, and you could hear Hitler's speeches at night. And my white neighbors were celebrating Hitler. And the media, national media, lied about it. Oh, they were just conservative, and America First was not about supporting Hitler. It was just like we didn't want to be involved in foreign entanglements. DS.
Right.
More than Charles Lindbergh and Henry Ford were pro-Nazis. And so fast forward to Lee Atwater, Reagan's first campaign speech after he got the nomination was in Philadelphia, Mississippi. We know that name only because Philadelphia, Mississippi lynched 3 civil rights workers. And it was Reagan's way of saying, under Lee Atwater's direction, to the South, I am your boy. The same way Trump is doing that now. And so the white entitlement as vehicle for inclusion is what must be combated. And the way to combat that is to create the space for people beginning to tell the truth.
Right.
And the people who are not telling the truth and are suffering over there from their exclusion injuries are no different from you and me. And the lie that's told to them that they bought in just to get into the game is blacks and or people of color, the newly hyphenated people of color. We became African American, Indians became Native American, Asians became Asian American, Asian Pacific Island American,
and Hispanic Americans as well.
Yes, all hyphenated, but no white people are hyphenated anymore. They're just all white.
Right.
Italians are white and Spaniards are white, and it's
right.
And one last thing I'll say on that at the moment, as we evolved, we stopped beating our children. At the present time, June 19th, 2024, every slave state plus Arizona still allows kids to be beaten in school. Everybody else is forbidden physical punishment of children. Yeah. And those people in our tribe who look like you and me, who are behind in their evolution, are still getting in trouble. And you have, you, Farron, shared an anecdote with me recently where a person's ostensibly hired to help children grow.
Yeah.
Said to you, don't let them talk about being hit at home because we have to repeat it.
Right.
And so what is that doing to that child?
Yeah. The suffer in silence, for sure.
Suffer in silence.
So what, before we end this, what do you want to say to the point of the objectification? I believe, you know, in my conversation with you these last 5, almost 6 years now, what stuck out to me most in the beginning was the objectification, right? The labeling.
Yes.
Because as a soldier, as a veteran, you know, looking back after talking to you, that I was able to objectify another human being to a terrorist, and then you trained to kill the terrorist, right? And then one day that brain's going to remember, your mind's going to remember that was not a terrorist, it was a human being, right?
Yeah.
And then you gotta live with that of whatever you've done from our brothers and sisters who was in combat and experienced that in that fashion. You got to live with that now. But even in today's society, if you're a Laker fan and a Clipper fan, I will kill you in the parking lot because you got on a Lakers jersey or a Clippers jersey, right? So in peeling off these labels, how can this help us heal from our own, right? Because we're not talking about the second-class citizens who the Irish, because the Irish were treated just as bad.
Yeah.
Right. Polish, like, so every culture has their experience of how they were treated coming to this country, or leaving their own country to come here is why they came to the United States. But for you, what is that first layer of that labeling that we have to peel off as a Black culture so that we can start to do the interpersonal relationship with ourselves first?
Two thoughts emerge. First, I want to acknowledge what has already evolved.
Okay.
What evolved was get money by any means necessary. And then with that money, you can give your children a chance for liberation. You can send your children to Harvard and Yale and Princeton. And that's what Joe Kennedy did for the Kennedy boys. And it not only worked, put him in the White House. John F. Joe Kennedy had cornered the market during Prohibition on Scotch and Irish whiskeys. And so he was essentially a drug dealer. He said it was a liquid drug. And the Kennedy gave money to the Roosevelt campaign. Roosevelt appointed him ambassador to England. And so this Roman Catholic Irishman got in, his family got in. In our generation, Jay-Z drug dealer Jay-Z. Simply follow the equation that was long established. And married a pretty girl. And their daughter can go and do anything she wants.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
The city of Los Angeles allowed him to create a big event on the mall downtown, and an elderly person who was in the facility where my wife was with her Alzheimer's confined was furious. He's a black man, an educated black man. He was head of the engineering department at Cal State Northridge, and he was furious that the city of Los Angeles allowed this black former drug dealer to have that kind of publicity to put on an event.
Right.
So that's one model, doing what has always been done. I assert that a way to reach more people in a healthier way is teach the 3 foundation skills that I already mentioned in this. That empowers our children to navigate that assimilation journey themselves.
Yeah.
And not just black children, all children.
Yeah.
And so the education arena is a potential solution. One word on that. We've got a model for it. At the dawn of the Industrial Revolution in the late 1800s, we were farmers. We were an agricultural nation, and the boys worked alongside their dad on the farm. The brand new industries said, we need workers. Went to Congress, we need workers, and all the boys are farmers. Congress passed the laws, put the money in the pot, and mandated every male child in secondary schools and public schools all across the United States must take shops, wood shop, metal shop, electric shop, print shop.
Mm-hmm.
And that sped up the transition from farm to industry.
Mm-hmm.
Mental health has been the deficiency and absence from our culture up until this point. Mindfulness just broke out in the last decade.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having seek it out on your own, government is the one that has all of our resources. These concepts about which you and I are speaking, taught in every school, every public school in the nation, creates a generation better able to navigate the idealized society that we're seeking, but that we'll never achieve until we make the commitment to doing it. And all of us struggling to heal from our injuries, white, black, brown, yellow, our children, our grandchildren would race toward that more perfect union rather than struggling and crawling toward it.
Yeah. And so lastly, again, it's Juneteenth. The celebrations have been going on since Saturday. What would be the first step to start that healing journey, right? So for me, I've learned for myself from the work that I've done the last 14 years. I had to turn within myself, right? Because a lot of the things that I dealt with I grew up because of how my parents were, right? And so as
Yeah.
children, you blame your parents, right? Silently sometimes. Not we won't
Yeah.
say it. It takes a lot of courage for somebody to say I can't stand my mom or dad, right? Because that looks
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
But silently we suffer and we say those things to ourselves, right? And
Yeah.
we don't get an opportunity to self-reflect, take a step back and look and see what my parents went through when they were children, what my grandparents was like when they were growing up, what this culture was like, where they came from, where their great like we don't take a look at that sometimes. But I think I not that I think, but I've learned for myself, like I had to do that to free myself from all those generations. My mom calls them generational curses. I call them generational consequences because the behaviors, right, gets passed on and gets passed on. And then we're dealing with today's consequences of our culture from not being able to reconcile those relationships, to understand how important forgiveness is, not just to other people, but to yourself, right? So is that important for the what's next, the self-reflection, the self
I think it is. I think it is for all of us. The school that I operated for 8 years was majority Caucasian, and that experience underscored for me the point that we make, that it's not a racial struggle. Everybody's struggling.
Right.
And Paul Linhart, 40 years later, I got a phone call from him. Do you remember me? And I said, of course I remember you, Paul. And he was delighted that I had not forgotten him. The previous conversation I'd had with him was 1976.
Mm.
And he said, I want to thank you for what you did for me when I was in high school. And I want to apologize for not participating in your groups at a level that I should have. But my mother was an alcoholic, and I was afraid of being exposed.
Mm.
And he said, but I was learning. I now know I was learning. And I went, because I was in your school, I was able to get into Berkeley out of high school. But I didn't have the confidence that I was as prepared as other students because your approach was different. You focused on mental health. He said, but I did well at Berkeley, but I still wasn't convinced. So I went to graduate school at MIT, and I was successful there. And so I'm calling you to apologize and to thank you. And the intake person, I was just checking into the VA for the first time in my life. And I because of my hand, I use speakerphone. And the intake officer had heard the conversation. He said, who was that? I said, he was a former student. It sounded like your son. I said, it was a continuation of a last conversation from 1976. And he said, no shit? I said, no shit. Well, in summary, Paul has continued his dialogue with me. He's successful in the IT industry, et cetera. And through our current dialogue, he has come to forgive his mother, whom he blamed and was ashamed of and tried to keep her out of his life, and now realizes that he shortchanged himself for that. And also, importantly, to forgive himself for not learning earlier that forgiveness. What he learned about his mother is she was a Holocaust survivor. She was an infant and a small toddler, but she had injuries that she didn't even know about. And alcohol was her way
to suppress it.
Yes.
Wow.
All right. I'm saying everybody has a story, and our stories are the same. We're all injured by the evolution of the culture, And the people who are leading the culture are doing it by trial and error. Where they learn, okay?
Yeah.
So we all have a role to play in getting this information out, because the people that we either blame or look up to are struggling as indeed you and I are. So
I gotta touch on this before we go, this last piece, because this is MBR Radio, military broadcast radio network, and 99% of these listeners are either military, their family members, law enforcement. What do you want to say to the military community about your curriculum? And thank you for trusting me to work with you and to allow me to take this on with you. But what do you want to say to our military community around the work that you've done with this? Now, this education has been used in from children to businesses, corporate office, elementary schools, middle schools, and veterans most recently. What do you want to say to the veterans about your curriculum and how we're going to be able to use this to help our own?
I am seeking further dialogue with a psychiatrist who got a large grant from the Veterans Administration to introduce mindfulness to the West LA Veterans facility. That is proceeding successfully, I'm told. You and I sat on one of the classes that came out of that. Mm-hmm. And every veteran, although they were seniors, every veteran in that class were intrigued by you and me. And I now have their phone numbers. They said, whatever you do next, please notify me. So that suggests that we have the potential for either under the umbrella of Dr. Sasaki or applying for our own VA grant, because every county in the United States has veterans who are struggling to make the transition to the kind of life we're talking about here. And so, you know, my mantra, I'm 90 years old, and young people like you and those of you who are in your age category out there who are listening to this, there's a role for you to play in bringing this about. And I'm counting on you, Farron, to carry the torch. Guys, you'll hear from us. We're working on it.
Yeah. All right, Caldwell. Any last words before I let you get out of here, man?
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, man. I really appreciate you for taking some time out. You know, we spent almost 90 minutes here going over just Juneteenth. Like I said, these are not right or wrong, good or bad conversations, right? It's always great to celebrate our culture, to celebrate what happened, the breakthroughs, but we also got to be able to celebrate those breakdowns and those weaknesses, so those weaknesses can become strength, right? So we're looking to strengthen those weaknesses, and the mindset, like you said, mindfulness is such a powerful, popular conversation now. But really, when you look in the Word, the Bible talks about repenting, renewing your heart, renewing your mind. Like that's where the work is. That's where the work is for us as human beings, is being able to reconcile those differences and deal with those emotions. Emotional intelligence is such a big conversation now. And so you play a part with your curriculum in a lot of these healings. And we talk about starting with our children. What do you want to point to as far as starting with our children?
We're seeking to approach Steve Ballmer, who's just built a $2 billion arena in Inglewood, whose school has lost 40% of its enrollment in the last 10 years, and who desperately need healing and correcting. or the Balmer $2 billion or the Kroenke $7 billion investment in arenas will not be fulfilled in terms of the potential for that city to rise from the ashes. Schools are the place that families look to as they determine where they want to live. And there's no shortage of resources among the Balmers and the Kroenkes. We're trying to tap that to create a pilot program that demonstrates how to fix the school, which has implication for the whole nation because every professional sports franchise is in a city that has struggling schools.
Yeah.
So I've got Farron and I have big vision. There's a role for you guys to play. Stay tuned. You'll hear from us.
And we're doing that at another level with the ABA.
Yes.
With the Ventura Orcas coming soon out there in the Oxnard, Ventura County area, we're partnered with the Rio School District to demonstrate something similar, even in the Ventura County. So again, Caldwell, thank you for your time, man. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, take care. All right, I appreciate you for hanging in the 90 minutes. I've had talk shows for 2 hours, so this is 90 minutes is nothing. Very important conversations. If you have any questions, farrond.com for sure to hit me up. I will share with you where we are, what we're up to. What else? Yeah, shouts out to NBR Radio for allowing me to do this short notice of a broadcast for Juneteenth. I really wasn't going to do anything today, to be honest. I was just going to kind of chill out. Of course, support my sickle cell conversation around World Sickle Cell Day. Juneteenth is World Sickle Cell Day. If you want information about sickle cell trait, wdconsct.org. That is my main cause. That's what you see up here, over there. Yeah, this way, that way. My cause. Very important. I'll be coming to the city of Ventura, Oxnard, Ventura County, bringing some sickle cell trait awareness. That's my plan with the ABA basketball team, orcasaba.com or wdconsct.org. Yeah, important. So enjoy your Juneteenth. Those of you who have the day off, it's more than just a holiday. It's more than just barbecues and hanging out, drinking beers. There's a conversation out here that people are suffering. If you just look at the suicide rate for all levels, all ages, levels, that suicide rate has increased drastically, unfortunately. And what is it? Some of us suffer in silence, but we're all dealing with something. And whether you're a veteran, an athlete, parent, student, police officer, we're human beings first, right? And we're spiritual beings before that. So it's important for us to figure out how do we start to heal these kind of conversations within, I call them the interpersonal relationships, that self-forgiveness. As all of my shows, the context returns itself back to that, points back to that conversation of self-forgiveness. Very important. So I appreciate y'all for tuning in. What is this, Wednesday? Yeah, so I'll be back Sunday night, 8 p.m., KCA Radio and MBR Radio .us, Sunday night at 8 p.m. Shouts out to the Sports Collective crew. We'll be back in the building. Shouts out to Alan Emmanuel for helping me out this month. It is Men's Mental Health Month. And so we've been doing topics around that on the Farron Dozier show. I actually have an event to speak at this Saturday from 12 to 5 to be on this mental health men's panel. Very important conversation for me. So if you care about those conversations, hit us up, lbisolutions.com or goaltenders.org for Caldwell's platform. You'll see all of our information on there. I'm the curricular trainer for that. Shouts out to Project 50. Dexter was here tuning in and listening in. I'm working with Project 50. I am his youth mentor counselor for the Project 50 in Ventura County. So again, very important topics for me at all levels. Son to parent, parent to child, veterans, youth, men especially. But don't second guess the conversation, because women, they're people too, right? And so I didn't realize that even in my inspirational reads that I wrote, that it could impact the women that came to that event that I did. And I shared that first one was the son to father relationship, the life of a 5-year-old. And it was majority women, if not all women. And they all walked away with a level of self-reflection and self-forgiveness, self-understanding, even a better understanding about their own father or their boyfriend or their husband, because of the conversations about how I was able to tell the truth about myself. And then they were able to look in their own life as women. But I do have one for women. That's the son to mother relationship, because I feel that that son to mother, mother to son relationship is so important. They say that the daughter is hardwired to the father, and then the son is hardwired to the mother. And so that's why both parents are so important to be in the lives of those students, of those children. All right. So I'm gonna get out of here. It's already 90 minutes plus, so I'm done. Again, I appreciate you all for listening, and I'll be back Sunday, the Farron Dozier Show on MBR Radio and KCA Radio 106.5 FM and 1050 AM. Get the apps. Both stations have the apps. So go pick up the apps. You can listen to us from all over the place if you download the app, or go to the websites as well. Shouts out to my sickle cell community. I'm always holding it down. Very important conversation. Globally, 300 million people have sickle cell trait, and many don't know. And there are risk factors and complications connected to sickle cell trait. Peace. Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm blessed, my brother. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Hey, did you see the game last night?
Oh, that was a good game.
But did you see the shot?
I lost money from that shot.
Oh, man, that shot was cold,
I
man.
hated it, but it was good. Damn. What's in those jeans?
You really want to know?
I do.
Exhaustion, muscle spasm, asthmatic issues, unexpected sickle cell trait crises.
Damn. Are you serious? When I was young, I found out I had sickle cell trait. My mom's told me, but I ain't have no knowledge of it. But when I got older, I had a child, and the doctor told me my daughter has sickle cell trait. Do you know the facts that both parents have sickle cell trait? There's a 50% chance the child may have the trait, and 25% chance the child may have the disease.
Hey, that's what's the count. Do you know that 2.5 million people in the United States have sickle cell trait, 300 million people globally? I didn't find out I had sickle cell trait until I was in the Army 10 years. Next thing you know, I had a sickle cell trait exertion site.
Sickle cell? I thought that was a black gene or something.
Nah, man, the Latin community is number 2. 1 out of 36,000 babies are being born with sickle cell disease. You could be Caucasian, Mediterranean, European. You gotta know your bloodline, man. There is an inherited gene in our community that has been forgotten. The name is sickle cell trait. WDCONSCT, also known as What's the Count, is out to bring awareness, education, and prevention to people all over the globe. Want more information? Call us now at 323-215-5384 or visit www.wdconsct.org.